Welcome back, and let's get to that interview we promised you with the City of Cape Town. Now, the taxi strike is over, but the stalemate between the City of Cape Town and Santaco did create huge negativity and overspills into many other spheres apart from the taxi industry. Now, the Western Cape MEC for Education on Tuesday announced that more than 850,000 or 71% of learners missed out on school. 92 schools were closed and almost 18,000 staff members were absent. And that is just the extent of the impact on the education sector. Now, the National Department of Transport declined an invitation to speak to us here on Morning Live, but a member of the mayoral committee responsible for urban mobility in the City of Cape Town, Rob Quintas, joins us now to discuss this matter further. Mr. Quintas, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much for having me, and a very good morning to all of the viewers.
So, Mr. Quintas, first off, if we could perhaps just summarize yesterday's meeting, because this has been a long while in the making, a week, that has seen great disruption across the City of Cape Town in particular. So what do you think caused the breakthrough yesterday?
So I think there are various factors, because I really do believe that the industry, in many ways, particularly the drivers who are driving day to day and living really cannot afford to continue staying away. One must remember that the operators and the leadership of the industry are well resourced and able to withstand sort of the shocks, economic shocks of not necessarily having an income for a period of days, but I don't believe that the same applies to the drivers. It could have been avoided in terms of the length of the time of the strike. We made proposals. I personally made proposals in person to Santaco last Friday, and basically what was put on the table in terms of proposals on Friday and then put on the table again by myself.
Well, our apologies there. Break in that line. Apologies, Mr. Quintas. I think, we just lost the connection to you there. But yes, you were talking about you making proposals yourself last week to Santaco. So if we could pick it up from that point.
Certainly. So the proposals I made on Friday last week, as well as on Sunday last week in person to Santaco, are basically the proposals that they accepted yesterday. So it's a great pity that they were unwilling to accept those proposals on Friday last week, because had they done so, they would have lifted the strike on Saturday, and we would have seen a return to normalcy. People who need to get to work, many of whom work in a no work, no pay type of industry, have lost a week of wages as a result of that.
That sounds rather curious, though. Are you saying it was the exact same proposal that you put to them last Friday that was accepted yesterday? No tweaks, no amendments to whatever the proposal was?
The very sort of minor tweaks, which are in fact big wins for both the city and the industry, included a mechanism whereby the minibus taxi industry would be able to have an escalation clause that they can use, where if they feel they're not getting where they need to get, with myself and the MEC for mobility in the province and the various officials of city and province, then they have a mechanism now in place which allows them to escalate their concerns to both the mayor and the premier. So that is a win for all sides in the hope of avoiding a strike such as this again. A second very important component of the tweaks or additions is that we have now reached an agreement. We tried to push as government for a 48-hour notification of strike action, just to avoid seeing commuters stranded as we did last week, and also to ensure that people have more than adequate time to make alternative travel arrangements during a period of strike. The industry did not want to agree to 48 hours, but have agreed to 36 hours of notification ahead of strike action. But we certainly hope that the mechanism that has now been built into the task team engagement process and protocols would allow them to escalate their concerns up and avoid a strike altogether. But I mean, those are largely the new additions to a proposal that was pretty much the same on a Friday and a Sunday last week.
But evidently significant enough for Santaco to agree to what is on the table now. But at the crux of this whole matter, it seems to be the application of the law, Mr. Quintas, the city's bylaws versus national laws. So let's talk to that. Is there, or let me ask whether the bylaws are at variance with some of the national laws at this time?
So that is one of the big misconceptions, misinformations, and miscommunications that have been coming out of the industry. And we have gone through this with them. The bylaw is not the appropriate tool that is being used for the impoundment of minibus taxis. The NLTA speaks very, very closely to the impoundable offences whereby there is no negotiation, and the city has been carrying those on. However, the NLTA also speaks to another condition that could warrant impoundment, is if there is a transgression of any of the operating license conditions as set by the various provinces. Each province has a provincial regulatory entity that sets the terms and conditions of what is required to adhere to when operating public transport, particularly in the minibus taxi space, and that allows for impoundment, and the city has been impounding according to the operating license conditions and contraventions thereof. So it is a bit of a miscommunication saying that we're utilising the bylaw. We are in fact utilising the statutes provided to us by the provincial government in terms of the regulation of the conditions of a taxi industry in Western Cape.
And not going to belabor where that, miscommunication stems from or how it escalated because we actually don't have the time to get into that. But I do want to know how many vehicles have been impounded by the City of Cape Town? How many minibus taxis have you impounded?
So the Safety and Security Directorate, which largely comprises our Metro Police, Traffic Police and law enforcement, on average are impounding around about 900 or so minibuses per month. I think it's also very important, though, to mention that only 1 in 5 pullovers, if you want to refer to it as that, by a peace officer, result in an impoundment. So we are impounding one vehicle for every 5 fines that are issued. So there are a lot of fines in the system that require payment still. However, we don't have this blanket approach that every pullover results in an impoundment. Only 1 in 5 result in an impoundment, and largely for what the city perceives to be serious contraventions, i.e. Very reckless driving that puts the commuters within that minibus and other road users at risk, as well as the conditions as set in the national legislation. The minibus taxi task team has been given the opportunity over the next 14 days to engage with the city and province to look through the 46 conditions of the operating license, to agree on going forward a standard operating procedure that our peace officers can be disseminated amongst our peace officers, whereby instead of removing the discretionary clause of the peace officers, they will in the future have a very clear standing operating procedure as to what contraventions are now impoundable and what contraventions are for the issuing of a fine only. So that is work that is ahead of us, and we look forward to that. I do need to state that we were given a very different reason as to why the taxi industry chose to stay away. We were told yesterday that it was in fact because of the very serious violence that erupted at the Cape Town station deck last week Thursday, and as a result of arrests being made for a person shooting live ammunition at law enforcement and traffic officers, and as a result of the impoundments that had taken place earlier that day. So I think those are the reasons we were provided largely as to why the strike was a snap strike that was called for immediately.
And just a final question, Mr. Quintas, with regard to the charges that were laid by the City of Cape Town. I'm very curious about the people who lost their lives. Have you laid charges in respect of that?
So remember, any criminal activity where someone has been killed or allegedly murdered in any form of violence or in any instance in the Republic of South Africa is a police matter. So those that have been arrested would have been arrested through the South African Police Services or arrested through our enforcement agencies. But remember, once the arrest happens by a city safety and security service, the alleged suspect is then taken to the nearest South African Police Services station, where they are then taken into custody. The city does not have the constitutional prerogative to have jails and also to begin the criminal investigation. That lies squarely with the South African Police Services.
Well, we'll leave it there for this morning. Thanks so much, Mayoral Committee Member for Urban Mobility, Rob Quintas, giving us an update on the taxi strike that has now finally been resolved, and taxis back on the road in Cape Town, in the Western Cape this morning. And we heard earlier as well from Santaco, Atule Joka speaking to one of the leaders there.